Hello, everybody, and welcome to day two of Onyx PathCon. Day three of Onyx
Day
PathCon? Day three of Onyx
three. Yeah, it's the
PathCon.
last day.
Wow. Apologies. The first day of Onyx PathCon is very late in the UK where I'm at, so it kind of gets folded into Saturday in my head somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, anyway, we're here to talk about Realms of Pugmire. I am Eddy Webb. Not only am I the executive producer and one of the in-house developers at Onyx Path Publishing, but also I am the creator of Pugmire because Realms of Pugmire is one of the creator-owned games at Onyx Path. So it's not an Onyx Path game; it's something that I actually own and Onyx Path publishes for me. So very uh, uh, integrated relationship, shall we say. And with me, I have two folks who have not only been inside Onyx Path, but also have worked on Realms of Pugmire for many, many years now. Dixie, why don't you start?
Hi, my name is Dixie Cochran, she, her. I am one of the in-house developers on Onyx Path Publishing. I've been doing that since 2018 now, which sounds crazy when I say it out loud, since time has been a flat circle since 2020.
Hmm.
That said, I have worked on not everything that's gone over Pugmire, but just about, from editing the initial core book, even editing the initial Ashcan, the
Oh yeah,
rules pre-test. Yeah, so I've edited Pugmire since 2015, thereabouts, and have written on several books for it. My specialty has ended up being character creation chapters, but I've had a really good time with it. And for the new edition, I worked on some monarchies stuff for Curious Cats of Mal, and I edited the core book, and I also wrote the Badger tribes for the upcoming Pugmire Unleashed, which is very exciting.
Badger Clans, but yes, yes,
Badger
I've seen
Clan,
that.
sorry. I got really good about that in my draft and then just
I
said it
know you
wrong on
did.
stream. Badger Clans, who used to be tribes, or who are called tribes by dogs, but that is incorrect.
Right. And how about you, Travis?
My name is Travis Legge. I have been had the extreme honor and pleasure of working on Pugmire for the last several years. I started freelancing regularly with Onyx Path like 7 years ago at this point, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Um,
saying, 2018,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like you and I
wild.
started around the same time, and that's a
Around,
lot.
yeah, you had been there for a little while when I started, but not that long. Yeah, it is time is a thing that passes by. Most recently, I had the joy of working on Pugmire Unleashed, where I got to introduce some new callings for dogs and also revisit some prior callings for dogs, and got to work in some new tricks. So lots of fun there. And yeah, also done a whole bunch of community content for Pugmire as well. So
Including
Awesome.
based on characters I've played.
true
They're
story.
random characters that we've done in the community content, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
Very fun.
absolutely.
And throughout this, if you have questions, if you're watching this live, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Please preface with the word question in all caps, so that way it's easier for folks to see. But to we're going to talk a lot about the upcoming book, but I do want to take a step back to catch people up who maybe are unfamiliar with Realms of Pugmire, because it's entirely possible maybe you're just watching this because you're waiting for the next Curseborn panel, you need something to do, or you're really excited about something else that we're working on. You thought, oh, I'll check out what this Pugmire thing's about. Um, Pugmire is a game I started working on back in 2015, which is basically it's a quote unquote fantasy game featuring anthropomorphic dogs, cats, and other pets. But secretly, it is actually a science fiction game set very far in the future of our world, where humanity has disappeared or has been wiped out for some reason that is unknown, leaving these uplifted animals behind to try to figure out what happened to their world. And so they believe all the stuff around them is actually secretly magic. Uh, the first edition of that game was used a heavily modified version of the fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons system. But over the years, there's a few things I wanted to kind of tweak and adjust. And as a result of that, I decided I wanted to go ahead and do a second edition. And due to decisions of the license holders of Dungeons and Dragons, shall we say, we went ahead and made that its own distinct system called Onyx 20.
That was a fun
And that,
like 2 weeks, wasn't it?
oh yeah, yeah. When the license holder for the system you have licensed decide to make major changes during your crowdfunder or right before your crowdfunder starts, while you're trying to move overseas, really fun
Yeah,
time.
that was a fun
Let me
time.
tell you.
I
Let
like
me
to
tell you.
I like to compare it to that scene in Superman 3, where Superman turns evil and then makes the Leaning Tower of Pisa straight. And it cuts to the guy who's like selling memorabilia, and he's all like crestfallen, so he has to make new miniatures of the tower. And then at the end, when Superman gets turned good again, he makes it leaning again, and the dude just snaps and starts breaking all of his minis with a broom. That's kind of how that felt. If to be a creator in that space.
That is that is not wrong. That is not wrong.
But I'll say that is something I had not thought about in like years. So
I know.
thanks for that.
From that scene you mentioned, it flashed back in my head. It was like, oh my god, yes. I was thinking more of the Avatar: Last Bender scene, like my cabbages, like.
Yeah, also apt.
That crowdfunder did quite well. We're pretty happy with it. And so the new edition, which is called Realms of Pugmire, is now available on Direct2RPG and Print on Demand and PDF. It will be available in stores at some point in the future due to a completely different set of things going on fire. We're waiting to get it printed, but it is definitely on our long-term plan. So one of the things I wanted to do with the new edition is I didn't want to just first of all I didn't want to get rid of the first edition, right? The first edition is just fine. Obviously, I as a designer and the person who created it wanted to make some changes, but none of it was like this game is broken and horribly wrong.
That's
It's
usually
not.
not why we do a new edition. We do a new edition because we have new ideas. We want to introduce new things to people. We want to introduce a new generation of gamers to our games. Like new
Mhm.
editions aren't like the old one sucks. Like I talk to fans all the time who are like, I still play Exalted 2E, and I'm like, you do you, buddy. Like I don't have fun. Pugmire 1 is
Exactly.
still there. I just think 2E is really cool.
Right. And to be clear, it's like, you can't find one in store, but that is not because we have pulled it out of the stores. That's because it's sold out completely after several reprints. So you can't buy anymore because everyone bought all the copies, which I'm deeply, deeply appreciative of. We don't usually run out of print runs like that. That is a rare occurrence, actually, especially going back and reprinting it and then running out of the updated print run. Those are just amazing things to have happen. So obviously, we're very happy and very proud of our work on first editions. But all that is still available on Draft RPG, print on demand, PDF. Um, but like you said, Dixie, we have new ideas. I wanted to expand a couple things I wanted to quietly retcon, a couple things I wanted to actually roll ahead a little bit, and also just some mechanics that I originally wanted to introduce, but at the time felt no, I don't know if people are going to get into this idea, so I feel like it needs to be something pretty close to how people feel Dungeons and Dragons should look. And I realized that was not necessarily something that needed to happen. So I was able to introduce more ideas, and then of course when we pivoted hard to just Onyx 20, I was able to introduce even a few more things on top of that I was on the fence about because there was do I need to keep compatibility? And say no, I don't necessarily need to keep compatibility. So with that, um, we also worked on we've worked on a few supplements. The first one, which I believe Travis, I don't know if you both worked on. I know Travis worked on it. Was Threats and Curs, which is our
Mhm.
monster book.
I did not work on Threats. Well, I think I edited
Okay,
Threats and Curse. Did I? I don't
right.
know.
It's been a minute.
I've
Yeah,
worked on so many books, Eddie.
that's why I asked.
I don't know what I worked on.
Did I,
I've seen Threats and Curse.
did I edit that
Yeah.
book full of monsters? Yeah. What a hard question to try to answer when you've been
In
working
this
on
company, it is actually.
it's like, oh, probably. Yeah, they do all
um,
sort of press together in that way.
yes, but first issue we had not done a manual of monsters, if you will, and so Rich and I talked about it. And we decided that it would be cool this time around to do just a big relative big terms of tome. And because there was a new edition, we felt we could experiment with a few things. So one of the things is that we decided rather than doing a crowdfunding campaign and waiting to see reaction, we just went right to print on demand. And also kind of as not as a joke, but like I was like, I would like to see a little bit of influence of the very first AD&D hardback monster manual.
Yeah.
Rich took it as a challenge, apparently.
Yes.
uh, and so it is the whole book is a straight up homage to the very first to the point where Rich got a copy. Oh, I already owned a copy because he pulled out his copy of the original monster manual. And was like, hey, there's a preface in this book, and you've written one, so I need you to write a preface while I'm laying it out
Yeah.
to add to that, so mimicking the tone of the original one. And also, Rich did all of the line art for it, so all the art is Rich's as well. So it was very much a Rich and me getting it to put together with the nice team of freelancers. But then after that, Rich and I just kind of riffing on how's it going to look, what we could put into it, how's it going to be organized, and all of that. And people have been really excited about the homage, as it were, towards the origins of our gaming brethren, as it were.
I did edit it. I looked it up.
Okay. And then we did Curious Cats of Mao, which is a supplement for Realms of Pugmire. Unlike in first edition, Monarchies of Mao was a separate rule book. And wow, again, I was very happy with how the book came out.
Hmm.
It didn't sell nearly as well as or as Pugmire first edition did. And B, a lot of people just assumed it was a supplement to Pugmire. And were a little disheartened to find that most of the book was taken up with rules they already felt like they had, even though that wasn't exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
That was the impression they got. So we decided to go ahead and just go in that direction, make it actual supplements. And Lauren, because I was in the middle of working on Threats and Curs, Lauren Roy stepped up to actually develop that book for us. And I know Dixie worked on Mao, but I don't know if Travis worked on Mao.
I didn't work directly on Mao. I worked on the Adventures, I believe, the supplement.
Hmm.
Oh, you worked on the Jumpstart, yes.
Yeah, the jump. Well, I worked on the Jumpstart, but also there was like a couple of other adventures. I think
Oh, okay.
maybe somewhere.
Yeah, there were three ventures in the back.
Yeah, some adventure somewhere I worked on.
This could be a great panel. This could be a great panel of me going, "You work on this?" That's like, I don't know. I guess I did.
Yeah, I did. I did character creation, and I did 2 of the monarchies. Because we wanted to really flush out what was in the monarchies this time. They all got like a paragraph in the first book, where it was like, these guys kind of do this thing. And by some serendipity, I don't think it was on purpose, I ended up getting the northernmost and southernmost monarchies. So I got to write 2 very, very different locations, which was fun. Yes, there's a One Piece reference in my southernmost one. Eddie said it was fine. But I got to invent a bunch of cool little towns, figuring out what kind of towns would be in like Siberian versus I forgot what the southernmost one was.
Rex.
Rex, yeah. But like figuring out what the differences were in culture from Siberian to Rex is really interesting. Because you are working with like these cats have cultures and there are separate kingdoms that happen to work together in kind of a parliamentary fashion. But yeah, it's really really interesting getting to define that based on, like I said, looking at the original core book and being like, okay, here's a little snippet. But also one of the conceits of Realms of Pugmire is that 5 years has passed.
Right.
So we were able to build some stuff up a little bit more. You could expand on things. You could say like, oh, whoever said was in charge of this isn't in charge anymore. Now it's this person for reasons. Or you can say, in the 5 years, this person has learned a lot, or has grown paranoid, or has done something. So it does give it the feel of like a living setting, which I really appreciated.
Right. Yeah. One of the big quote unquote canonical changes between editions is that in first edition, it was implied that relationships between Pugmire and the monarchies of Mao were tense, but there were opening negotiations between the two nations.
Hmm.
And one of the big events of Realms of Pugmire is that something has happened and Pugmire has kicked all of the Mao diplomats out.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Mao diplomats were recalled and Pugmire kind of slammed the door behind them, as it were. So something has broken down in negotiations. So like Dixie said, that allows you to kind of reframe a couple things, increase the political intrigue
Mm-hmm.
within Mao, stuff like that.
Also, what's going on with Pugmire? Dogs are supposed to be all friendly and stuff. What
Right,
are y'all
right.
doing over there, dogs?
See how dogs doing. But that actually leads to next thing is that the book we're working on now has been through several titles. I initially announced it in this is funny. There's four titles. I forgot to mention one previously. It was mentioned in Threats and Curs in a passing reference as Pugmire's Player's Guide. And then when I actually put it together, I had a placeholder, intentionally placeholder title of Expansion of the Realms. It was a
Mm-hmm.
title that I wasn't happy with, Rich wasn't happy with, but it was good enough to get the project started because we had to call it something, right? Working titles are generally just we have to call this book something to distinguish it from the 150 other books we're working on. But this is not the title we plan to go to press with.
Yeah, it is. It
Uh,
is rare that we like have a title immediately and go for it. It happens sometimes, but things at least get workshopped usually.
right. We try to get all that done before we announce it, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And then we have to kind of go, oh, I actually think we called this. Now it's this now. Because we don't want to, we want to avoid that confusion. But
Yeah.
for example, digression briefly, but for a long time, Curseborn was literally called Untitled Monster Game for like years.
Yeah, we talked about that in the first Curseborn panel about how like for like we kicked that off in like 2018, and yeah, it was Untitled Monster Game until like I don't know 2022.
Yeah.
Like literally just called it UMG. Like we just always called it UMG, and then finally I think Rich was the one who actually like decided on the title, and all of us were like, yeah, okay, yeah, this
Well, and
this
if
this makes sense.
correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't actually change in the internal tracking even until like
Until like we announced it
2024.
at the con,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
We're like, oh, we should
Oh, yeah.
probably change all this over from UMG to Curseborn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, like seriously, the drafts of documents were until 6 months ago were still in a folder on my file called UMG files. So like, yeah, these things do linger, right? Um, so ultimately, I actually chatted with the teams like, hey, if you have some brainstorm ideas, and kicked around some, I narrowed it down to a few. Ultimately, I decided on Pugmire and Beyond. Um, and then internally, as we are talking about preparing for the upcoming crowdfunding campaign, um, uh, James Bell made a fantastic pun of Pugmire Unleashed, and Rich was like, "Oh, Eddie, use that as a title." And I was like, "Actually, that is a really good title, actually."
It is a good
So we
title.
told James, "Hey, we're stealing that.
It's like
Make up a
extra
new
good
pun."
because this book is the one that contains a lot of the more unusual animals that
Right.
are
Hmm.
uplifted. So these are mostly animals that you would not expect to ever see on a leash.
Right.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
it's for sure in some cases. Like I used to have ferrets and I put leashes on my ferrets because they wanted to go outside and dig in the dirt. But like it's rare. It's rare that you put leashes on these animals.
Exactly.
I would not want to
Uh,
put a leash on a badger. That sounds like a bad idea.
I absolutely want to put a leash on a badger. I want a badger friend.
I mean, European badgers would be adorable on a
That's what
leash.
I'm
American badgers,
saying.
not so much.
Oh no, I want like a cute little black and white European badger, like a little badger
Right.
boy.
Right. Right. Not the horrifying thing that is the American badger. Anyway, um, uh, before we go into badgers, we'll get there in a second. So this is going to be what I've been calling a player's guide plus. It does have a little bit of material for guides, but that is all going to be rolled into a chapter in the back of the book that'll have three adventures as well as some new enemies for guides to have access to.
Hmm.
We're not going to talk too much about that at the moment, but because a lot of this is intended to be player focused. And players guides, for those who don't know, aren't familiar with parlance, um, on one hand, are just basically what they say on the tin. They are guides for players. They are supplements that are primarily geared for players, and generally are focused on adding new playable options for players or expanding on existing playable options, basically allowing for new and interesting edge cases or things that make sense, but maybe the core rulebook wouldn't go into because it would dilute the focus too much. And so one of the first obvious ones is new dog callings, new dog playable options. And that was one of the things that Travis was responsible for. So, Travis, you want to talk a little bit about kind of the new callings that you worked on?
Yeah. So we reintroduced the Guardian. I hope I'm not misspeaking. From that had been introduced in Pirates of Pugmire.
Hmm.
We
Crusader,
reintroduced Crusader. Right, the Guardian was already there. Crusader was the one we
right?
reintroduced, and we reintroduced the Gun Dog, um,
Yes.
which we had done some work on Gunpowder Panic and how all that would work
Mm-hmm.
already for Threats and Curs,
Hmm.
and then again in Curious Cats. So that was really just more. Uh, the Gun Dog was probably the easiest because it was just kind of almost a straight up port to
Thanks. I'm glad I wrote it all right in Pirates of Pugmire.
yeah, that was really easy to move over. Um, the Crusader we got into because we also introduced a new calling called the Bargist, um, and the Crusader is sort of occupies a space similar to a paladin,
Yes, that was the initial design philosophy.
whereas whereas the Bargist occupies a space that's similar to a warlock,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
though a Bargist, if you explained to a Bargist what a D&D warlock was, they would be highly offended at the comparison.
Well, yeah, because they wouldn't make a pact with the unseen, would they?
Right. No, they control them. They tell them what to
Yeah, that's
do.
what dogs
Nice.
do.
Exactly. They are in charge. They are the master of these unseen as far as they're concerned.
There is no downside, no negative consequences to making
And
bargains with unseen. Not at all.
No,
nothing whatsoever.
just
And
ask,
then
just ask the Badgers. That's fine.
exactly. And so they have we had to sort of delve into what motivates these two callings that are very driven, belief driven,
Mm-hmm.
but from wildly different perspectives. And again, to differentiate the Crusader from the um, Shepherd, what makes that all tick was a very interesting thing to explore. And then also we settled on Scholar, I believe, was the
Yep.
name
Dollar. Hmm.
for the other calling that is more of almost like an Indiana Jones type.
Mm-hmm.
They are very archaeologically inclined, and they're very much about going and fetching uh, masterworks, just like other dogs are. But they have a very different perspective on what that means, and they're very quick to question any sort of orthodoxy, and which makes them very very cool to my mind because they're asking a lot of questions about the setting that I think no one else really is yet,
Hmm.
which makes them a fun sort of player insert, especially if you have an established group and you're bringing in like a new person. I think that's a cool. I think that'd be a fun sort of audience insert type character almost.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then creating those and then creating the powers for them was a real hoot. Lots of fun stuff. The Bargists are probably my personal favorite. They're just a lot of fun
Mm-hmm.
to play around with. But yeah, those are the four new dog callings for this edition.
Hmm. And as a note, you'll note that Dixie and Travis talking about the setting here. One of the things I wanted to do, because I knew that the people out were hiring for this had all worked on the material that we were reinventing for the new edition. So I intentionally switched up.
Mm-hmm.
So Dixie worked on this stuff. So I made sure Travis worked on this stuff this time around. One of the writers had worked on the Lagomorphs, the rabbits and hares, and so I had somebody else pick up that material this time around. I specifically wanted to switch it up because I wanted to get new and fresh
Mm-hmm.
perspectives on things. Um, but like Dixie, like we talked here, like a lot of it was the writers going, "Oh, it's a really cool thing I hadn't thought of. That was really cool." Or I'm really glad that that material was really inspirational for you. I mean, so there was no animosity. It was no like,
No.
oh my God, you ruined my thing. It was much more, oh, that's so cool. What if you did this too? You know?
Yeah, I talked about this a bit in our like actual like Realms of Pugmire Discord. You occasionally have these little flashes of like, what, I didn't do it right in the first place, but you learn really
Hmm.
quickly to like push those out of your brain because that's just your imposter syndrome writer brain
Right.
being a jerk. Because really, like, it is super exciting to see people update the material that you wrote. Like,
Hmm.
the the gun dog has a special place in my heart, not because it's a gun dog, but because that was in Pirates where I initially memorialized my first pet.
Hmm.
The quote in the gun dog is a Scots Terrier named after the pet that my parents had before I was born, who passed away when I was like a very small child.
Hmm.
So that it was special to me for that, but that was the only like thing I had with it. And guess what? I still have the piece of art. I can look at it anytime I want. It's great. Same with whenever we update mice and rats. Like, I don't know that I'll be writing character creation for them again, but that's fine. Like, I want to see what someone else does with them. Because mice and rats are really cool. And I had fun writing them the first time around. I was very, very privileged to write cats this time because for the first edition, I was not really writing for Onyx Path yet. I was
Hmm.
mostly just editing. So I edited the original Pugmire and Curious Cats, or not Curious Cats, Monarchies of Mel. Um, I spent so much time switching it to the new one in my head that now I can't call
Right.
it the original name.
Right.
But yeah, like, I'm a cat person. I have three of them. There's one there. There's one in the window. Like, they're around. Uh, so writing cat character creation was really, fun for me because I'm a cat person. Uh, and I'm glad I got to do it. It's cool. And yeah, watching stuff get updated is really neat because I wrote a lot of character creation in first edition. So watching people update the reptiles was really neat because they were a lot of fun in Pirates. The birds, same thing. Like, birds were a lot of fun. I didn't know a ton about birds or reptiles when we started writing them in Pirates, and I learned a bunch. And now we have learned even more, and we have changed things, and they're they're still there, but now there's more of them, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Um, I'll talk about those in a second.
Sure.
Because the other thing I want to talk about, since Travis mentioned the Barghest, which is new to any edition of Pugmire.
Yeah.
Barghest are a brand new calling. They're a spell casting calling, and in the past, when we introduced new spell casting callings outside of the core rulebooks, it was a lot of use these people's spells. Maybe you got a handful of spells, but that was it. Just because we didn't have the room to go into it. Because all of this is dedicated to new options, we are able to now. There's still a lot of use these spells, but not out of we don't have the room, but rather it's these spells already exist. There's no
Yeah.
point in rewriting the exact same text again. But we can actually create new spells, and so Travis made a little over a dozen for the Barghast. So the Barghast uses a lot of spells from other callings, but then also it has like another dozen that are distinctive to them.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think originally the discussion was like, give me five new spells or something
yeah,
like
four or
that. And
five. Yeah,
I was like, but Eddie, look at all these cool spells I
right,
have.
Well, Badger is stuck to what Eddie said, and I only wrote five new spells for them, so I'm sorry.
right. But I mean, and another thing is also sometimes the new spells are also spells that existed in Curious Cats, but people may not necessarily have Curious Cats, so we did reprint those that were relevant to
Yeah.
this. So even if you still have four or five brand new spells, there's still if you don't have Curious Cats, there's going to be a lot more spells that are new to you, um, and a few of them have been very slightly tweaked to fit the specifics of what we're trying to go for. Um, the other thing, really quick, obviously I recap Gunpowder Panic. We talked about that firearms. I also recapped and updated the seafaring and sailing rules. But also we have now guilds and lodges for dogs. So it's new kinds of organizations and societies your dog can be a part of, both visible and invisible, well created and nefarious. Just a lot more organizations to do stuff with. And then talk more about some of the prominent dog families because there's lots of name dropping over the years of the pugs and the Dobermans and the Afghans and whatnot. And so I took the time to actually write up here's a good chunk about each of them and the people who are in charge of them and what they do and what they're all about. And also some advice because over the years, I've come to realize that it's not just D&D with dogs. That's obviously a very good shorthand if you're trying to get someone excited about the game.
Yeah.
But the way the dogs act in this have over time evolved their own distinctive style. And so I thought it was worth it to finally sit down and talk about here are the big things that dogs do as player characters. So when you play your character, think about these things when you're playing a dog character, to give you some advice and guidance on how to play them if you're new to Pugmire or if you just have been looking for some help on that front.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, the next big one, which, as I mentioned before, is something that people have been asking for a long time, are the Badger clans. So, Dixie, talk a little bit about the Badger clans.
Yeah, so the Badger clans have been around, obviously, since first edition as antagonists. Um, we, over the course of a few books, kind of softened them here, softened them there, made some notes about the usage of words like barbarian,
Mm-hmm.
and how maybe a dog or a cat might call them that, but they do have their own culture. They're a nomadic people. And this was the book where we really, uh, I guess the best term is to humanize them. We
Right.
really wanted to make them A, playable, and B,
Protagonize them.
yeah, yeah, like make them A, playable, and B, able to maybe start joining the rest of society if they want to.
Mhm.
Which is actually something that's causing a bit of a schism in their clan right now. It's because there are quite a few of them who are like, why would we do that? Why would we settle down and make cities and live like them? We live like badgers. Badgers are different.
Right.
Uh, Badgers have always been kind of a hodgepodge of animals, which I think is a neat thing about them. They're a very adoptive tribe. It's possible, very, very rare, but there could be like a cat badger,
Mhm.
or a mouse badger, or a turtle badger, because they will adopt anybody who's like in good faith wants to live their lifestyle. However, primarily they're made up of badgers, otters, polecats, which includes skunks, wolverines, and ferrets. I think that was all of it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, because you have Brock as the Badger.
Yeah, we changed the term for just a badger, like a plain badger, to Brock in the book, simply because since they're all called badgers, the sentences were getting confusing. So when you
Right.
see the term Brock, that's like a traditional English badger, American badger, honey badger, any kind of badger you want to play. Um, and then for their callings, I was it took me a minute. Like Eddie had some suggested callings, and I finally settled on the idea of structuring their callings like a hunting party.
Hmm.
So like the various roles you would have in their hunting parties. I have my draft open right now because of course I have to. Um, so we've got the kind of bashers, which are the big, strong, go in and hit things with clubs types. Trappers, snipers, and wild speakers. Wild speakers were already named. They are
Right.
the one spellcasting calling for badgers. The other ones are kind of self-explanatory. Like you know what a sniper is, you know what a trapper is. That's what they do.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, it was a lot of fun working on them. I took a lot of inspiration from both things I've read about both fictional and real, uh, like cave tribes from several thousand years ago, but also a lot of Scottish Highland clans, which is my family's
Mm.
background. So that was kind of cool to like dig into because I've always had a bit of Scottish history, thrown at me because of my family. So they do have this, very like, yes, they're fighty, but people from the outside view them as a lot more fighty than they are because a lot of that's just how they present, how they
Right.
play with each other. Like, they're definitely not as vicious as a lot of the other animals make them out to be. And they have this really rich culture of like storytelling and stuff, but the main thing they lacked until recently was a common language with the rest of the animals in Pugmire. And of course, Kibu the Red has brought them the gift of the common language and united some of the tribes, and now they can all speak, whatever we call common in Pugmire. There's really a name for
Mhm.
the
It's the language.
yeah,
The la-
the language. Uh, but yeah, like they're really really interesting. And I'm not just saying it because I wrote them. Like I've gone through all of the old books and looked at all the different places where badgers were mentioned, and kind of tried to consolidate all the information and tweak it a little bit. Because I've always been interested in what the badger tribes were up to. Because clearly they
Mm.
had something going on. And now we got to present it to folks. So I'm excited for people to actually read that chapter when we do the Kickstarter or whatever crowdfunder, um, and see how they feel about them. Because yeah, you can play badgers now. You can play badgers within Pugmire or the monarchies, although they're a little rarer still. Or you
Yep.
can just play a little roaming band of badgers going on adventures, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, and as we talked about, they do divide into various clans. Unlike houses for cats, these aren't mechanically load bearing
No.
decision, because they're so fluid. If five people in a clan have a fight, you may have two clans at the end of the day, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Clans are between, I think I said, like 5 and 50. Like
Yeah.
there's when you're talking about a nomadic clan, like you got to be able to move all those people from place to
Mhm.
place, and therefore, like especially with the level of technology that we're at in Pugmire, you really can't be like, oh, here's our 500 person caravan trooping along the plains. Like that's very unlikely to happen.
Right.
So most clans are pretty small and tightly knit, but they obviously also like trade members as they meet each other, and people pair off or form new clans, all kinds of things. So they're very fluid.
Yes. And it's funny. One of the things I try with Pugmire specifically very hard not to use real world analogies, or when I do, I
Mm.
try to give two contrasting real world analogies. But that doesn't mean I'm immune to them. And so when I had badgers in my head, I tried to describe them in a way that Dixie would understand, but I never used the words I want them to be like Celtic clans.
No.
But I had Ireland and Scotland in my head when I was thinking about how they would organize. The fact that Dixie picked up on that and said, "Oh yes, like Scottish Highland, like Robert the Bruce era, Scottish Highland tribes," and I'm like, "Yeah, that very much what I had in mind." I was also thinking kind of pre Ireland invasion
Hmm.
High Kings too,
Yep.
and certainly the term king gets floated around a little bit in the Badger draft for exactly that kind of reason too. So I mean, like it's
Badgers have no king. No, sorry.
right, exactly. But the idea of Hebrews trying to be a king, but is also trying to avoid that title because of how low that it is because of the past.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah,
a
because
lot
I
of
mean,
cool stuff with the Badgers.
they're a little Scottish Highland, they're a little Neanderthal, and they're a little Dothraki. Like they're a little
Yeah.
any nomadic people or folks who organize in clans I could pull from. I kind of just looked at all those for inspiration, but they're not based on any one thing, which I think is always the key when you're writing fantasy. Is you can't just do like a one-to-one analogy that often. You
Hmm.
like need to pull from like, okay, here's 8 historical examples that I can mush together into a little ball and say like, hey, badger.
Right. Exactly. So we danced around this. There are going to be other species playable.
Yeah.
Some of these have been updated from uh, Pirates of Pugmire, but also all of them have expanded. So I'll kind of go a little more quickly through them, and I'll hit some high points. But the three other groups we have are uh, birds, lagomorphs, and reptiles.
Hmm.
So I'll start with birds alphabetically. And birds are much like they are in Realms of Pugmire. They are divided by their caste, which is their nest with an E, based on how well they can fly, how close they are to the Sky Kingdom. So birds that can't fly, birds that can kind of sort of fly, and birds that can really fly. Uh, and that's uh, uh, I forget which one's a which, but crow,
It's
parrot, and
sparrows,
sparrow.
crows, parrots. Yeah.
Right. And I forget which one's a which. Yeah, it's right. Parrots are the ones that can't fly. I remember that now
Yes.
because
Sparrows.
Holly
Sparrows are the flightiest ones, which
and
I
crows the glidey ones.
yeah, which I did because they're the they're lightweight songbirds in real life. So I was like,
Right.
okay, sparrows make sense. They're
Yeah.
and yeah,
We have added ducks, which are animals that are closer to water than the air, or birds that are closer to the water than the air. Um,
a lower nest than a parrot. Who would have thought?
right, yeah, and of course the ducks like, no, screw you, we're amazing in the water, you know. um, But that was actually one of the challenges was because one of the conversations we had was like I don't want to have character classes where if you don't have a game set around the water, they're basically pointless to play.
Right.
So what I frequently refer to in my head and sometimes out loud as the Aquaman problem is Aquaman is amazing in one very specific environment, and otherwise is just the guy in the yellow suit that stands around while everybody else does work.
I think of it as the
Um,
mermaid problem for that exact reason, because every now and then
yeah,
in a fantasy game, somebody's like, I'd play mermaid, and it's like, do you? Do
right.
you?
But do you?
Because what if we want to go
Uh,
somewhere where there isn't water?
right. But we have worked around that. Obviously, they still have stuff that helps in water, but they're not. That's not exclusive to them. And then we have new bird callings. The Rhymer, which is from Realms of Pugmire. Oh, sorry, from Pirates of Pugmire. We also have, and the Augur, I think, is also from Pirates.
Nope.
Uh, okay, okay, so Augur is more of a prediction
Yep.
calling.
That one's new.
Collector is kind of their version of a rogue, which is just, oh, yeah, this thing was in my pocket. I don't know how it got there. But it's really shiny. The Raptor, which is the Fighty Bird, so you can make Howard a duck by playing a duck raptor. We've tested this out; it does work. Um, and the Rhymer is the more originally was very kind of a very sea based spellcast, which made sense for pirates. We've expanded it to be a little more nature ish.
Which is what we did with the Mystic as well for
Right.
Curious Cats. And also, I didn't really talk about this earlier, so I should mention it real quick. The Wild Speaker is kind of a Druid Ranger amalgamation
Hmm.
in terms of their casting for Badgers, because I wanted, like, Badgers don't have a super specific religion, they're like spirit worshippers. So I
Right.
wanted to give them that like druid nature, which means they have quite a few mystic spells. But I pulled some high level like ranger like D&D spells and reskinned them and stuff like that, so they could do a lot of like talk to plants, like animal companions, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Lagomorphs are the rabbits and hares, which are the two big kind of upbringing splits for that. Um, and their callings have been pretty much reworked from the Squeaks the Deep Companion. So we have the Boxer, the Digger, the Runaway, and the Sentinel. Boxer is the fighter rabbit. Digger is much more exploratory rabbit. Runaway is the running, very fast rabbit. And the Sentinel is more kind of a warrior defender rabbit.
Hmm.
The Digger is also kind of our artifact mage. And that was something that we really fudged because not only was it not we didn't have room for it because it was in a book, it was a stretch goal, so I had even less room to really pull that off. So it was lots of very hand wavy. They're like spells, but they work this way. So those have been they still use spells. They still at fundamental level use spells. They don't have a complete different magic system. But a lot of their spells are a lot more summon a small thing that's actually a mechanical object and some more rules on like how those objects get shared. Um, and then reptiles, lizard, serpent, and turtle from pirates have been brought through and updated. We've added frogs. We talked about this earlier. They don't quite fit into Reptile Society, but they have decided that with the way the world is going in the past few years, that they need to step up and get some friends. No parallel to modern society whatsoever. And Callings, the Alchemist from Pirates, which is very much a salt magician. They're your alchemist kind of potions. Um, Mirages are your sneaky, sneaky fighters. Strider is kind of a woodlandy type thing, and Weaver is another spellcasting type, but they're more about using stories as a form of magic.
Hmm.
Since we're getting low on time and we have some questions,
Yeah, I was gonna say
I
we're
yeah,
Eddie, Travis, and I can talk about Pugmire for like 4 hours.
forever.
You know, plus
Easy.
on
Yeah.
a longer panel next time.
If Pugmire Con, yeah, we can
Right.
easily.
But then real quick, I did mention there's three adventures in the back. They are roughly linked, very, very roughly linked, but they touch on some of the changes that have been going on in Pugmire and some of the contents of Pugmire.
Hmm.
But another big chapter is what we call the Empire of Good Dogs, which is simply that we name drop other cities around Pugmire and never really talk about them. So we cover Houndton, which is the other big city of the Empire. Mutt Town, which is the unofficial town on the outskirts of Pugmire. Update Waterdog Ports to include some new changes in the continuity. And then some other fringe areas like small villages, other areas that we've referenced in first edition that were dog managed or where dogs lived, and a couple others that were referenced in the book. So like the Vargas that Travis get together, they train in a place called the Tower of Night, and so we talk about the Tower of Night in this chapter as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of cool locations to where your character might be from or might be aware of, as well as cool adventure possible locations.
There's also a spa and water park run by otters, which isn't in the adventures, but it's just a place you can hang out.
Right. Yes.
Which sounds awesome. That sounds like
I just really need it. So, like, badgers are nomadic, but they have a few permanent locations. And I was like, what would be a great, like, otter-specific location? And I was like, well, they have to run, like, a hot springs and water park, right?
Right.
Is that what otters would do?
In my head is like 50% medieval Japanese spa and 50% like Great Lakes water park.
Yeah, it's like an onsen with a slip and slide. Yeah, it's fucking great.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Anyway, so we have 15 minutes left. Sorry, I went a bit long. No, I'm not. But Dixie, could you let me know what some of the questions are?
Yeah.
Or Travis, either one.
So we already talked about bunnies a little bit. Someone asked about their society. Is there anything rabbit specific to their society you want to talk about versus just their callings?
Yeah. Really quick, the reason why rabbits and hares don't show up much in Pugmire is because for a very long time, their society was underground and they were terrified. So they kind of kept to themselves. But rabbits were the more kind of homebound, kind of hobbity characters, where hares go off and explore and then come back sometimes. And so occasionally people would run into a lagomorph. It was probably a hare, but they would often call them rabbits, and hares wouldn't necessarily correct them or would get highly offended depending on the individual hare. So they were a very insular society, but again, with a lot of developments that have happened on the underneath side, which we haven't revealed yet, they're starting to get more integrated with the rest of society for protection purposes. They're just starting to kind of make their way into the world.
Yeah, part of why a lot of them are these smaller species, especially, are scared of badgers, is because badgers just blunder through things very easily.
Yeah.
When something 3 times your size accidentally digs into your home, like that's a monster, right? No, that's a wolverine who was looking for a grub to eat. Like, sorry. Yeah. All right, so someone asked, can you give your thoughts on the religions the uplifted pets follow? I know the Church of Man is a big deal. Are there more?
There are. But one thing I tried very hard to avoid is I wanted to make sure every character had access to an avenue of faith, but I did not want to be like, here's the boxes you could fit your faith into. I wanted faith to be complex and nuanced like it is in real life. So, for example, cats have faith, but it is not necessarily the bridge religion. They have faith that they have 9 total lives and they reincarnate, and that they're at some point on their reincarnation scale. It's not true, and the book makes it very clear that explicitly, no, they have 1 life. That you don't get to make a new character when this character dies. Or you do, but they're connected to the previous character.
They're people like anybody else.
Right.
They're not solar exalted.
But they believe that they have past lives, and that shapes how they interact with each other. So for all intents and purposes, that is a form of religion. Like Dixie said, the Badger clans have a form of nature worship, a nature spirit worship. So they don't go to a church necessarily, but it is a form of faith. There are the rabbits feel very strongly, like the dogs do, about the humanity, but for the opposite reason. Humanity is terrifying and teaches them lessons by hurting them very badly. And so the fact that dogs would worship someone like that makes them really scary and people to avoid, which is one of the many reasons why they don't hang out with dogs.
Yeah. We don't have them in this edition yet, but a lot of mice also believe in man.
Right.
But once again, have a different relationship than dogs do. Because if you think about how we as a species, like we humans, treat various kinds of animals, they are very different. Like, I don't walk my cats. In fact, I tell my cats to shove off all the time because they're in my seat.
Right.
I don't personally have pet rats. A lot of people do, but also a lot
Mhm.
of labs do still experiment on rabbits and mice and rats, and that's
Yep.
part of where their background comes from. We don't interact as warmly, pun intended, with reptiles.
Right.
Uh, for obvious reasons. A lot of them spend most of their time sitting on logs, doing
Right,
nothing.
and so the reptiles are sun worshippers. They literally think that all anything good comes from the sun, and
Yeah.
anything that, which is why again the contrast them with the species that live underground.
So the most codified religion is definitely the Code of Man.
Yep.
Just in terms of like it has tenets you follow. It has theological debate about some of those tenets and things like that. But like there's spirituality available to all characters, which I think is really cool.
Hmm.
And also, it could be really interesting to play like Badger or a mouse who decides to follow the Code of Man. Like, what does that mean to
Certainly.
them?
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
know.
What does be a good dog mean when you're a cat that follows the faith?
Yeah. All right, so will Pugmire 2.0, aka the Onyx 20 version, be available for Canis Minor at some point?
Yes, absolutely. That is definitely the plan. But we had to get all first edition available first. I think Travis, you had just mentioned off mic that we just did that, right?
Yeah, Squeaks was just added, I think, within the last month.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So now anything that was out for first edition is fair game for Canis Minor.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
and I do just want to take a half a second while we're talking about that to point out that the Realms core book has conversion guides in it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like, I have an idea that's really cool for the current edition, but it's not open yet for Cadence Minor. You can take that idea and design it under the first edition rule set, and there's a structure there that will allow players to bring
Mm-hmm.
it to their table for either edition.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
that's one of the cool things about the way the Realms book is set up.
Right. There's lots of reasons why it's taken a minute. Part of that is, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the first issue was all tied with an open game license. The new edition is not tied to the open game license, but it does change the legal ramifications of how we do a community content program.
Yes.
We haven't had we things have been so on fire. We haven't had a minute to think through all the ramifications of that yet. But certainly, we absolutely want to do that, and it will happen at some point in the future.
Yep. So on our leash question, somebody did ask, how do uplifted dogs of Pugmire feel about leashes? Do they have any cultural or mythical significance?
That's an interesting one. Uh, Strays and mutts have a strong connection to it because they consider civilization to be a leash, and that terminology is used pretty frequently throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Some xenophobic dogs or dogs who feel very strongly against mutts might use the term leash pejoratively in the sense of to try to get them under control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to be honest, I have intentionally had a very light touch on that as a symbol because it is for me uncomfortably close to slave collars, and I do not want that symbol floating around in my bunny dog game.
Yeah.
So that is why there's not a strong connection on the text. But if you want to introduce that to your game and your players are fine with that, absolutely, it is ripe for it. But I certainly don't want my friends of color to look at that and go, "Oh, it's okay to put a leash on somebody because of their historical past."
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And it's one of those things where like I hadn't even thought of that, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's not great. Not great. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Quick digression. But you would think for a silly game about dogs in the far future, you wouldn't have to worry about diversity consultings. But absolutely, it's something that I have learned over many years that is absolutely necessary because of exactly stuff like that.
Oh yeah, we were very
Um,
careful about the rats and also working on the badgers.
yep.
Like that was something
Hmm.
that we were as sensitive as we could be about it because like both of both of these species, especially the mice and rats, have negative cultural connotations from certain people that we didn't
Yep.
want to bring into our funny dog game.
Hmm.
Okay, so are there? I'm assuming the answer to this is no, but somebody did ask: are there plans for pet insects to be playable in the future?
No, and I will quickly elaborate. My metric for pets, with the understanding that I have broken this, but for intentional reasons, in general, I only include pets that people have a cultural relationship with because I have pointed out you can have anything for a pet, and some people have lots of like, why don't you have tigers in the game? Because there's like one guy on TV had a pet tiger. It's like you have a pet of anything, right? But we don't have a cultural relationship with pet tigers. We have a cultural relationship with pet dogs, with pet cats, with pet rabbits, with pet birds. And so that's why I try to really focus on that. I obviously badger exceptions, but badgers were intentional exceptions. Like, here's one type that breaks out of that mold, and what does that play look like? Ducks are another exception because while we don't have a cultural connection to them as pets, we do have cultural connection to them as a symbol, as an icon. Lots of characters, Daffy, Donald.
Also,
Certainly,
like
there we have lots of
feeding ducks by a lake is like a
right.
nice pastime for a lot of people.
Right. We have a connection with ducks, even though we had not domesticated them in quite the same way. And so that's why I thought that was fine. Frogs, again, just on the cusp of that. But insects, no, they're a bit too far. But if you do want to play insects in D&D, I point you to Crossroad Continent that Rich Thomas has created.
That is an option. I also did want to say Deviant the Renegades is right there if you want to play an
Also true.
anthropomorphized insect. Just
Yep.
get your Brundlefly on.
Yep. I'll say I had a lot of fun playing a Grasshopper Mage in Rich's Crossroad Continent games, though. The Crossroad Continent game.
Yes, yeah. Crossroads Continent has pretty much anything you could want to play is
Also
right there
ducks.
in the people's.
Or you could go play Trinity Anima and
Also
play
true.
an insect person in that.
That's true. Yeah.
Um,
Insects abound.
yeah. Last question that I have, at least for now, unless somebody brings one right under the radar like they did in my last panel. The callings in Pugmire seem to be restricted by species. Is this a cultural aspect, like could you have a cat raised by dogs learn a dog calling, or is it more of an essential aspect, like only dogs can learn dog callings?
It is the former, and to a degree that was always my intent, but one of the many things that I wanted to change in New Edition is that I realized the way I had structured callings in first edition did not allow for easy porting. There was a lot of, you could do 90% of it, but there's a couple things you had to switch. Um, uh, I have now redesigned them on the back ends to where if you really want to say, hey, I'm playing a dog that was raised by badgers, can I play a wild speaker? Yes, there's nothing stopping you. You just take the use the dog stuff. There are very rarely there are species specific tricks, and they're called out as such. And that's the only thing that stops you now. Originally, that stuff was kind of more baked into the callings, but now I was able to kind of pull those out and say, okay, if you're a dog, no matter what, you can't take a badger specific trick, but you can still learn a badger calling. It's not an option I talk about a lot in the books, but another reason is that also one thing I wanted to do with the new edition is certainly some of the other callings, like the cat calling was like, yeah, it's basically ratter but cats, or this is the rascal is mice but cat, or ratter but mice, and I wanted to get around that. And so as we're doing this, taking the option, okay, let's how can we push this into a slightly different direction? Let's take the original foundation and build on that in a slightly different way. And Travis proved that thesis correct, because the scholar is not Ratter but Indiana Jones. Even it's just a dog calling, but it's actually doing kind of the grave robbing thing in a very specific different direction. Just shows that yes, callings can be totally distinct and have interesting connotations that are divorced from species. So yes, you absolutely can mix and match species or callings now without any significant consequence.
Yeah. I mean, like, the only ones that I would personally, in a home game, it would be a little weird to have, like, I don't know, Badger Shepherd. Because there's a couple things where I'm like, it kind of breaks the thing to have a Badger, like, priest of the Church of Man. But maybe you could be the weirdest outlier. But, like, that really just depends on you and your table and how you discuss things with your guide.
Sure. Right. Like for example, that idea. I mean, I could see the my badger was the last shepherd in a village that is so far from Pugmire that Pugmire forgot about it. And so there was like one priest left. He had nobody else to teach. And this badger's like, I really want to learn. And so they made this badger a shepherd because there was no other dogs around to teach the magic to. So I mean, you could argue with enough story, you could argue around it, but there's nothing in the system going, no, you can't do that.
Well, and life and culture are messy and sloppy and slap into one another, and in the real world, it's so interconnected. Why would the same not be true for the realms?
Exactly. Right.
Oh my god, now I want to write a story about a badger priest who everybody just thought was a really ugly dog. Like he just was like raised by dogs. He was found as like a little Wolverine puppy, and they're like, yeah, he's weird, but like he's a dog, right?
That has very strong annotations of Carrot from the Discworld series, who was a human
Yeah,
that was raised by dwarves. Yeah.
yeah. Very much. Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah. See exactly. But that's it. We're out of time. So thank you all for hanging out. I think great questions. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Travis and Dixie, for getting up early enough to hang out with me and talk about my silly dog game. It's always a treat.
Thanks for the
You know how
opportunity to
much
do so.
I love this silly dog game.
I know.
You know that. I got up at 7:45 in the morning to talk about the silly dog game, and
I
I do not
know. I
usually get
know.
up before 9. So
I appreciate that. Um, after this is our third and final Curseborn panel. So if you want
yes.
to hear about the future of Curseborn, you can feel free to do that. Travis, what is actual playing right now?
I do believe Trinity Continuum Assassins is up on the actual play over at Plastic Age Plays. I will raid us over there when that's done, but if you're into the actual play, hang out. If you want to learn more about Curseborn, come back over here in 30,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll be having the Where Curseborn is Go. There's an official title for all these, but in my head, it's Where Have We Been, Where Are We At, Where We're Going.
Yep.
And the
Yep.
one that's coming up is Where We're Going.
Also, this one has like 5 people on it, so you're gonna get some new perspectives that you haven't heard as much yet. You're gonna hear from, I think, Lauren Roy, Dee, Rich. Like, yeah, it is the biggest Curseborn panel that we've had so far. So you're gonna hear some new cool stuff.
Yeah, and if there's
Absolutely.
any questions that you had over the weekend about Curseborn, where we've said, "Hey, we'll answer that later," this is the one. The one coming
Yep.
up is the later one. So
Yeah, I would say that
definitely,
your final chance for that is probably the What's Up panel, which is directly after that. So,
Right.
yeah.
all right,
Awesome.
cool.
See y'all soon.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.